Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. And in today's video, I want to ask all of you watching a question. And it's not a question that I know the answer to, but it's certainly one that I have some thoughts on, and I'm going to share some of those with you in this video. But it's a question I want to reach out and ask you guys because, I value your input and I kind of want to get my finger on the pulse of where everybody's mind is at today. And the question is, where do you want to park your wealth in a scenario like we're facing today? Where do you want to have your money when you are facing the somewhat extreme circumstances that we're facing at the moment? And I hesitate to use the word extreme because I know things could get a lot more extreme. That's always a fact. And there are things that are possible that could make today's situation look mild by comparison. But I think we're facing a somewhat extreme set of circumstances in the sense that, we got $30 trillion in national debt. We've got inflation that seems to hit a new record high every month. The last CPI print just came out at 7.5%. It's the highest rating in 40 years. And if you use the same methodology that they used to use to calculate inflation way back 40 years ago, if you use that same methodology today, it actually would put the CPI significantly higher, somewhere around 15%. Basically, the highest inflation that we've ever experienced, at least the highest inflation since 1971, when we were put on the current fiat monetary standard. So we've got that going on. We have record low interest rates, and the Fed seems inexplicably unwilling to raise interest rates. They keep talking about it, keep paying a lot of lip service to it, and they keep saying that the economy is strong and that it could withstand rate increases, but still we don't get them. At the last FOMC meeting, we'd already gotten 7% inflation year over year at the latest print at that time, and they still declined to raise rates, saying they would probably do it at the next meeting. So, I do think that they're going to do it soon. The fact that we already have record high inflation and they're just not willing to get ahead of the ball on inflation, I think should be of concern to just about anybody who holds US dollars. So in today's situation, where do you think is a good spot to put your wealth? Because obviously, if you've been watching the channel for any time, you know that I think that physical silver is a good way to protect your wealth from inflation, but we haven't really seen that begin to play out yet in the current inflationary cycle that we're going through. And I've had some folks commenting on the channel about how silver's not a good hedge against inflation because look, inflation's at 7.5% and silver's still just sitting around $23. And there's something to that. It's possible, of course, that inflation works its way through the system and into different asset classes at a different pace for each asset. So maybe silver's just lagging. And if that is the case, obviously at today's prices, the fact that silver hasn't gone up is an opportunity to get your hands on some physical. But maybe that's not what's happening, right? Is today different? Is silver not going to move up this time with inflation? And to that, I do just want to say that I think that over the long term, if you look at the long-term history of silver and the past 50 or so years, that silver really is a good hedge against inflation, but I can kind of see why people would be doubting that today. But one thing I do want to point out is, if you go all the way back to 1968, there was a time when you could actually take paper money in the U.S., dollars like this one, and this is a silver certificate from 1957. So there was a time when you could take this to the bank and you could exchange it for one of these, a silver dollar. Now, the silver dollar doesn't have quite a full troy ounce of silver. It's just under 0.8 troy ounces. I forget the exact number for one of these, but it's less than a troy ounce. But you could take one of these bills and you could take it and get a Morgan dollar or a Peace dollar or something like that. And if you were to do that, let's say you had $1,000 back in 1968, and you went and you converted all of those dollar bills into physical silver, because 1968 was the last year you could do that. If you had done that, It's true that today, you'd have maybe $16 or $17 worth of silver in each coin. That's not like a horrible return, I guess, as far as inflation protection. Certainly, other assets have done better. Stocks, for example, equities have provided a better hedge against inflation in that sense. But that's the thing about physical silver, because if you want to go out and buy one of these Morgan dollars, you're not going to be paying $16 or $17 for it. And if you have some of these and you want to go sell them, if you sell them for 16 or 17 bucks, you're crazy. Yes, that's not a it's not a very good deal in today's market. You can take one of these Morgan dollars today and you can sell it probably for 30, 35, $40. I mean, you might have to find the right buyer. It might take a little bit of work. But even if you go to a dealer, you're probably going to get maybe 30 bucks for one of these. So I think that shows that physical silver specifically is a true hedge against inflation, and probably better than paper silver, because anybody who had taken their 1968 dollars and converted them into some kind of paper silver vehicle, they would have had $16 or $17 worth of silver today. But if they did physical, they've got $30 to $40 worth of physical silver today. Silver, when you take the long-term view, it really is a hedge against inflation. So I don't think, there's much to the argument that this stuff is not really an inflation hedge. But so why hasn't it moved up? We've got 7.5% inflation now, and it's true that, this past Friday we did see a pretty decent move up in gold and silver, and that was on the news that the U.S. released that said that they expect Russia to invade Ukraine at any time. That's an unfortunate situation we've got going on over in Europe right now. But gold especially looked like it was kind of breaking out a little bit on that news, and silver followed it up a little bit, had a decent day. So, the global instability that we're experiencing, the high inflation, it's not like silver and gold don't respond to those at all. But still, they haven't moved as much as you might expect. If you, were expecting silver to function as an inflation hedge, you'd expect at this point with, month after month getting these record high inflation prints, that the price would have moved more. And so, I don't know the exact answer to why silver has lagged like it has. To the extent that silver really is an inflation hedge, then I would say that the fact that it hasn't moved up yet is just kind of a gift to those of us who want to acquire it. And it's given us a little more time to stack the metal. But also, it could be a little concerning. If you're putting all your eggs in one basket with silver to protect you against inflation, you probably would feel a little uncomfortable. And, that's one reason that I think in today's environment, you can't really go all in on one asset class. I mean, that's typically not advisable anyway. I like having some physical metal on hand. It makes me feel a lot better in case some kind of a fiscal disaster, an economic disaster does manifest itself. If we get hyperinflation or if we get a currency collapse, at least I've got my insurance policy against that. But I certainly don't think it's appropriate to have all of your wealth tied up in physical silver in today's environment. If the price of silver were to drop dramatically, I might think that maybe allocating a larger portion would be a good idea, just to kind of buy the dip and get in there. But that's exactly why you want to have some other things on hand, especially cash. And it's kind of hard to be holding cash in an environment where, you're pretty much guaranteed to be losing at least 7.5% of your purchasing power every year. When you have a 7.5% inflation rate, cash isn't something you want to have a ton of. But that being said, I think that there's definitely something to be said for having some on hand, because not only do we have this geopolitical instability, not only do we have record low interest rates, not only do we have record high inflation, we also have record valuations in tons of assets. I mean, it seems like tech stocks, the NASDAQ, the S&P in general, the S&P 500 seems to be at a very lofty level. The NASDAQ seems to be at a very lofty level. Cryptocurrencies, I mean, they've had a bit of a correction from their highs of last year, but it's so hard to know with cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. Bitcoin at 40,000, is it a screaming cheap deal, or is it an incredibly overvalued bubble? It's kind of hard to say, to be honest. So, I have a little bit of Bitcoin, not too much, but I just kind of have that sitting in storage, and I'm just sitting on it, sort of, in my mind, like a Hail Mary kind of thing. I mean, you might lose everything in crypto, but you might get some kind of a return. But definitely, I do have a lot more faith in physical metal and tangible assets like silver as a way to hedge against inflation and preserve wealth in light of some kind of a calamity. But let me know what you guys think, because it's not something that I think anybody can know 100% one way or the other. I mean, obviously, if you had a crystal ball, you'd be a billionaire, right? Because you would know exactly what to trade, and you could just go in with leverage and clean house every time. But it is hard to know. And now, I mean, I think in the long run, having physical silver at today's low prices, acquiring metal while it's cheap like it is, I think that that will pay off in the long run, and that's why I'm doing it. It's not like I'm just talking about this stuff. I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm acquiring physical silver. And, of course, guys, I'm not a financial advisor or anything. I'm just a guy on YouTube, so take everything I'm saying with a grain of salt. Always do your own research in terms of investments and that sort of things. Do your own due diligence. And also, if you guys are enjoying this video so far, do give it a big thumbs up down below, please. And if you like seeing videos about silver and inflation and the Fed and all that stuff, why not subscribe to the channel? Is silver where you want to be putting your money in today's financial climate? Again, hard to say. There probably are other spots you could be taking advantage of as well. There are companies and stocks that will benefit from inflation. Oil and energy stocks clearly have been a beneficiary so far of this inflationary wave, as oil now, I think it touched $95 on Friday on that news of the potential invasion of Ukraine. So, I mean, that's no small move. And it was only a couple years ago that oil was, dirt cheap. It was way, way low, and all the energy stocks were in the pits. And if you were stacking energy stocks and acquiring those at that time, I mean, you've certainly done well for yourself. And the nice thing about those companies, as opposed to, say, silver, is they pay a dividend. They're engaged in productive work, and they're making cash, and they're distributing that to shareholders. So there's something to be said for holding assets like that too. Now, tech stocks and growth stocks and all the stuff that we've seen move up so much over the past 10 years, to me, those are really expensive right now, and their valuations are quite high. But again, like I said, you do want to hold some cash because, in my view, those assets are extremely overpriced at today's valuations, but that also means that they're kind of ripe for a correction. So if we see a big move down, say the S&P 500 gets cut in half, it drops by 50%. That is not outside the realm of possibilities. And I'm not saying it's going to happen. I think that the Fed, sort of has their put still in place, and they're not going to let stocks and assets fall too much. But you could see on some kind of a calamitous news a big spike down before anybody can get out ahead of it and do damage control. And the S&P 500, it's expensive today, but at a 50% discount to today's prices, that might not be such a bad deal. So, you definitely want to have some cash, and I don't think you want to have a huge cash position, but you don't want to miss out on opportunities that present themselves either. And that, 7.5% loss in purchasing power, it can be a tough pill to swallow, but to the extent that you keep your cash ready to deploy, you might be able to, make that worth your while. So, I don't know. I would like to know what you guys think. Do you think that holding cash is a good idea in today's environment? Do you think that holding physical metal is a good idea? What do you like more, gold or silver? I tend to like silver because of where the gold to silver ratio is at. Again, silver I do really believe is a good inflation hedge. Just think about it again. Back in 1968, you had your 1968 dollar, which you could turn in for one of these. You could buy at the bank a silver dollar for a $1 bill. And today, a $1 bill won't even buy you one of these. So think about that. I mean, silver definitely has, to at least some extent, protected purchasing power over the past 50 years or so. I believe that it will continue to do so moving forward, but only time will tell. It hasn't really moved up yet. But one thing I do think could catalyze a big move up in silver is once investors at large realize that the Fed is kind of stuck and the Fed can't raise interest rates, because again, we've got $30 trillion in national debt. How much can the Fed really raise rates when the United States Treasury has got to service $30 trillion in debt? It means every point that the federal funds rate goes up, the Treasury is paying an extra $300 billion annually just in interest and debt service. So, how sustainable is that? That obviously can't go on for too long before interest and debt service becomes the number one item in the national budget. So it's not like you can just raise interest rates with no repercussions in today's environment. And why don't people see that now? Why don't investors recognize that inflation is here to stay in a big way and that it's not going anywhere and that the Fed is kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place? I don't know. I mean, the Fed does constantly put out these talking points, and at their meetings, they constantly give these press conferences where they tell everybody that the economy is strong. and that they're going to be able to get ahead of inflation. But, clearly one of those things isn't true. And clearly they're not going to be able to get ahead of inflation. So when will investors realize that? I'm not sure, but I think the day is coming. And I think that when they do finally realize that inflation is going to get out of control and that the dollar's days are numbered, I think that investors will flock into precious metals and that the price is going to get bid super high. And I think there's other assets that will benefit from that as well. I think gold miners, silver miners, those are companies that right now, I mean, they might be just breaking even or, making a few bucks per ounce of silver or per ounce of gold. But, if the price of gold or the price of silver doubles, well, their earnings are going to do really well, and they're going to be paying out big fat cash dividends to investors. And I think that right now, those are still a sector that is super cheap. The time to get into energy stocks was a couple years ago when the price of oil was really low. Well, the time to get into silver stocks and silver miners might be right now while the price of silver is low. I get comments a lot of times too that say silver hasn't moved up. Silver's cheap. It's not an inflation hedge. It's a terrible place to put your money. Well, I mean, personally, I want to buy assets when they are cheap. Now, that doesn't mean I want to buy an asset that, a stock that's a falling knife or something like that, maybe a stock that'll never make money or never be viable. But here's the thing about silver. It's never not going to be viable. I mean, this silver has already been mined. There's constant demand for silver. You need silver to make solar panels. You need it to make cell phones. You need it to make electric cars. You need it for all sorts of stuff. And it gets consumed. And there's actually less available above ground silver than there is gold. So think about that. Gold worth, 80 times the price of silver at the moment? And yet there's actually more of it available than silver. So I do think that the time's going to come when silver is moving up and it's going to compress that gold to silver ratio. And I think that folks who are holding silver will do better than other precious metals. But again, that's just my opinion. And I would love to hear what you guys have to say and what you think and what assets, not just precious metals related. If there's stocks, if there's foreign stocks, if there's a specific stock, let me know in the comments below. If you have got some ideas about how to preserve wealth in the extraordinary scenario that we find ourselves in today, I'd love to hear what you guys think. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see some more videos about gold and silver like this one, then go ahead and check these out right here. And I will catch you guys next time. Happy stacking. Thank you all very much for watching. Smart Silver Stacker, out.